My name is Gisela and I'm a 22-year-old graphics designer. If you would have asked me a few years ago, I'd have said my life was pretty easygoing and uneventful. But now, not so much. It's very chaotic and full of drama, and I've recently learned there are very few people in my life I can depend on. Even if for nothing else, but moral support. Those people I adore and lean on the most are my maternal grandparents. I do have to thank my father for allowing me, while growing up, to maintain a stable relationship with them. But over time, I've learned that was not without ulterior motives. I'm not exactly saying my father is the bad guy here, but his new wife, my stepmother Belle. I'm not entirely sure about anymore. Aunt Belle has always been a part of my life. She was my late mother's best friend. So, after my mother died when I was just 4 years old, it wasn't so strange to see her as often as I did. I was young and had no idea of the inner workings of the adults around me. I have a vague memory of my mother and Aunt Belle laughing and talking while me and my now stepsister Constance, 20 years old, and I played with our toys. But one day my mom was gone and Aunt Belle was there, permanently. So it wasn't such a huge adjustment for me at the time. Like I said, I didn't know any better. I don't know if I can classify my stepmother Aunt Belle as a wicked stepmother, but over time she's come close to holding that distinction. Maybe it's because I've always loved her and thought she always had my best interest. But the more I'm away from them, the more I question my entire childhood up till this point. But the only bright spot was my grandma and grandpa. They were very comforting to me when I would have a bout of confusion between missing my mom and wanting my mean stepsister, who used to be my childhood BFF, and now little brother Joey, now 16 years old, from my dad and Aunt Belle, out of my life. It wasn't always this way. But once my father remarried and they all moved in, things changed. First, it was me having to give up my room to Constance because she was younger than me and my room was closer to my parents' room. My father said to me one day with Aunt Belle sitting next to him and holding his hand while smiling at me, "Honey, do this for your dad. You're a big girl now. Don't you want your sister to be comfortable in her new home? Your room will be just down the hall." But the room was not only down the hall, but half the size of my current room. It was the room he and my mother used as their office and a spare guest room when family came. I remember thinking in my young brain, why can't I at least have the spare bedroom? It was much larger and closer to the family. 6 months later, my question was answered. That's when my half-brother Joey came into the world. That room later became his nursery. The only semblance of my former life that I could hold on to was when my maternal grandparents would come and take me to spend a few days out of the month with them. But as I got older, it became less and less frequent. And though I spoke to them a lot over the phone, it was rare for me to go and visit them. Maybe on occasional holidays, but that too was cut to a minimum. Like I said before, that was grown-ups doing grown-up stuff. And even when I wanted to ask them why they stopped spending time with me, I never gathered the nerve to ask. Maybe subconsciously I was afraid they'd tell me they didn't want to see me anymore, like my mom who left out of my life so abruptly. That fear kept me silent. Until it was time for graduation. I was 2 years older than Constance and 6 years older than Joey. So, I was the oldest sister, so I did everything first. Still, Aunt Belle always striven for all things to be equal, at least that was the way it was explained to me, so she wanted me to delay college until Constance graduated. That was 2 years on. This request was asinine to me and I flatly refused. This is when I began to open my eyes to the dysfunction around me. The cracks in our blended family were being shattered and pulverized in an instant, which made me wonder if it was always this way and I'm just now noticing it. Why should I have to wait? I remember asking Aunt Belle. She was looking exacerbated, fed up with my questioning her authority in what's best for the family. She said this a million times. I knew the look. I'm just trying to do what's fair. Why can't you wait a couple of years for your sister? But I had to question her logic. Why do I have to wait an additional 2 years? I'm ready for college now. And besides, I didn't realize it until this time, but I was ready to leave this house. When Constance graduate, are you then going to make us wait another 4 years until Joey is ready for college? I knew I was being glib, but I didn't regret. Even when she gave me a hard slap across the face. I don't need your smart lip, she said enraged. You're not going to college. It's settled. I retreated to my plainly decorated room and plopped on the bed. I knew I couldn't stay any longer, but I also knew my dad would side with my stepmother and continue to pressure me to listen to her. Whether her logic made sense or not. It was just the easiest thing to do in this family. Placate, compromise, concede. But it was the conversation I overheard with my father and stepmother that smacked sense into my head. I waited all day to see my father to convince him to have her reconsider. But she reached him first, as usual. They were in their room arguing about how they were going to deal with this latest saga. Bill, you need to talk some sense into your daughter, I could hear her words through the closed door. My daughter. Isn't she? Our daughter. I could hear my father say. Now I see where she gets her smart tongue from. I've done all I can over the years to make her see that I'm trying to be fair, but she's being bullheaded and stubborn. It's not too much to ask her to wait 2 more years until Constance is ready. Why should she have to wait? I recall hearing my father ask her. Because we need to split her college fund among the 2 of them, that's why. Why should all of that money go to just her? And her grandparents are cruel for only thinking about her. We're a family. That's when the light bulb in my head went off. Money, it was always about money with her. My father said, Belle, don't get so worked up. We saved money for the other kids' college fund. What's the big deal? Because we don't have enough. Gisela will be debt-free when she graduates and our kids will have to take a loan to supplement what we managed to save. Do you think that's fair? Tell me. Belle could be heard yelling at my father and she didn't care at this point if they could be overheard or not. She kept on with her diatribe, or more like an assassination against me. Who do they think they are? If I didn't intervene, she'd be living high off the hog and our other kids would have nothing. Do you hear me? Nothing. They're her grandparents. If they want to gift her with things, leave it be. Why always interfere? They never treated my kids as equals. They never saved a trust for them. How is that fair? That's why I kicked them out of our lives. You know that. I've explained this to you before. We agreed. If they couldn't treat them all as their grandchildren, then they'd lose the one they have. It's only fair. She kept yelling at my father. I don't care. Do what you want to do, he said and stormed out of the room. This was too much to process, so I silently closed my door and laid back down on my bed to think it all through. For the next couple of weeks, there was nothing but tension in the house. It was supposed to be a celebratory occasion with my graduation coming up, but instead it was feeling like we were preparing for a funeral. Constance was just selfish and entitled and could care less about what was going on around her. She just wanted stuff and more stuff and to be able to hang out with her friends. Which no longer included me in this circle. Ever since we reached our teens, she began to openly show her disdain for me. I don't know when it started, but here we are. I have to say, Joey was a delightful boy. Although he was young, he was smart enough to know how to read the room. He was the reason I developed an interest in graphic designing. For my graduation present, he made an animation for me showing all of the things he loved and cherished about me being his big sister. He didn't want to wait to show it to me, maybe because he knew I was feeling down and he wanted to cheer me up. I have to say, it made me cry. I genuinely love him. He was nothing like his mother and sister. He was more like Dad. Quiet, reserved and non-confrontational. I, on the other hand, was just plain naive. I was a people pleaser. I didn't want anyone to be angry, so I'd just comply with whatever request, no matter how ridiculous. I have a track record. But this was an unfruitful trait I was determined to break. On graduation day, I put all of that behind me. No one was going to dampen my mood. My grandparents promised to be there and I couldn't be happier. It had been a while since I'd seen them and I couldn't wait. Of course my family was going to attend, dysfunctional or not. Though Constance balked and complained, she finally threw on something and trained her sourpuss face to frown and scowl for the next few hours. But I didn't care. This was my day. I wasn't going to allow her to make it about her. I wasn't going to share my gifts like I've had to do in the past. No matter how hard she cried or what temper tantrum she threw. I wasn't relenting this time. Today was all about me and my accomplishments and my road to starting a future without them. Yeah, but it didn't work out that way. My grandparents treated us all to an expensive dinner at one of my favorite restaurants. They already had reservations and when we arrived the room was well decorated and very festive. I have to say, it was all going well. Surprisingly, Constance was like a different person. She was much like the old Constance I knew when we were younger. I silently wondered why she wasn't like this all the time. I missed her from before. Kind, considerate and quite charming. It made me wonder if this was the real Constance or if this was the act. My stepmother was awkward, but she tried to overcome that with being overly chatty and sugary sweet in her tone. It came off as fake, which it was. Where my father was somber and only spoke when was directly spoken to. It was like he was being circumspect and somber. Maybe the gravity of this day finally hit him. His baby girl was an adult now, and soon leaving to chart her own way in life. "Attention everyone," my grandfather said over our chatter. "I'd like to say a few words for my beautiful granddaughter." I don't know why, but this made me automatically look to my stepmother and Constance. They did not even pretend to hide their scoffing. They rolled their eyes at this and inwardly said, "Humph." He went on to say how much he and my grandma loved me and how proud they were. He mentioned how he knew my mother would be proud too. And how she would be pleased that I was going to attend her alma mater this fall. My stepmother and Constance became visibly uncomfortable. My dad and Joey looked somber, like they both wanted to cry. I knew they were going to be the ones who'd miss me in this family. I was going to miss them too. This is when my grandma handed me 2 envelopes, with a big beautiful smile plastered on her face. "This is for you, darling. We waited for years to be able to give this to you." I opened the thinner envelope first. No reason, it just seemed more judicious and less complicated. It was a check. A huge check. My eyes couldn't comprehend what I was seeing. I had to use my finger to count the zeros on it. "Thank you, Grandma, Grandpa." I stood up and gave them the biggest hug ever, tears streaming down my cheeks. "Life was hard on you, but I hope this will even things out for you from here on out. Hopefully this will give you a good start in the new chapter in your life," my grandpa said while wiping his own tears away. That's when the silence was broken. It was Constance. "How much is it? I need to know so I'll know how much I'm getting when I graduate." She tried to say this in a sweet tone, but it was falling flat and false. Her greed was showing. My stepmother chimed in. "It's so good to have generous grandparents, right children? Thank them for being a part of your lives." I wanted to respond, but I was cut off by none other than my sweet, soft-spoken grandma. "Don't give your children false hope. Although you have wonderful children, they are not our grandchildren. Remember, you made that abundantly clear to us when you stopped us from seeing our granddaughter. So, please stop trying to control everyone around you. We cannot be controlled or manipulated by you." These words made my stepmother jump from her seat. "What? How dare you? I only told you if you were not going to treat the other kids as equals then. "Enough," my father yelled at my stepmother. This was so rare everyone's eyes widened with surprise, including hers. "But honey, we're all family. Why do they have to always keep my kids out? If there's an inheritance, why can't they split it equally? That's all I'm saying," she tried to defend her crude behavior. "Because they're related to her by her mother. You're not her mother. They have no blood relation to any of us, but Gisela. And I've allowed your selfishness and greed to nearly ruin the only tie to her mother." So stop it and shut up, my father said loudly. So does this mean I won't get any money? Constance said in a loud whisper to Aunt Belle. Then why did you make me come here? I didn't even want to be here. You told me I was going to get my share of the inheritance if I showed up. So, does this mean I get nothing? She whined as she said this. My Aunt Belle could be heard whispering to Constance as I began opening the second envelope. We'll just make sure you and Joey inherit the house. If we sell it, it'll be a pretty good-sized inheritance. It was the deed to the house. Our house, the house I grew up in. It was an inheritance from my mother. My grandparents bought it for her when she graduated college and soon after she married my dad and had me. It was always her dream to raise her family in it, but she didn't live long enough to realize that dream. But she was the sole owner and it now belonged to me. What? So you're saying she gets to keep all of the money from the college fund and now our house? Constance yelled out, but to no one in particular. She was just yelling. It's never been our house. It's always been her house, my father said. Why did you never tell me this? Why am I hearing about this for the first time now? My stepmother cried out. What do you have? Mom, cut it out. You're embarrassing, Joey finally said. You could tell he was truly ashamed of his mother and sister's behavior. My stepmother grabbed Constance and Joey and started dragging them out of the restaurant. Why did I stay married to you this long? I don't need a broke husband. Joey broke from her tight grip on his arm and rushed back towards our dad who was looking dejected. I'm staying with Dad. I'm not going with you. She looked back and assessed them for a while. She stuck her nose in the air and pulled Constance along with her. I want a divorce. So my college graduation went better than my high school graduation. This time it was my father and half-brother Joey and Grandma. Grandpa died a few years ago. I was happy to be able to spend that time rekindling the relationship that was stolen from us by my greedy and selfish stepmother, Aunt Belle. I learned she tried to blackmail them by withholding visitation with me. When she was friends with my mother, she always thought she was a stay-at-home mom because of my dad. But she couldn't be further from the truth. My mother was a trust fund baby, and my dad was a hard-working man. So when she found out it was my grandparents who held the purse strings, she tried to use me as a bartering chip. But my grandparents proved they had more patience than she did and simply waited until I was old enough to learn the truth and make my own decisions. And I chose them over anything. Especially over a toxic stepmother and stepsister. After their divorce, my father won Joey in the custody battle. She did receive alimony for a couple of years until Constance graduated. Then his financial obligation to her ceased. She had to get a job and make her own income. And from what I've learned from Joey, it's minuscule because she had no skills and no work experience. As for Constance, none of us could figure out why she was so obsessed with the college fund. As it turned out, she barely had the grades to graduate high school. She had no intentions of going to college. From what we've learned, she got pregnant with her boyfriend, and he moved her and their daughter into a trailer, but he's in and out of jail. So, times are rough for her. Joey decided when he graduates he's wanting to attend mine and my mother's alma mater. He has the grades and knowledge to back it up. He'll do well as long as he keeps his distance from his mother and sister. And he's cut them off entirely so far, so I'm sure that won't be a problem for him. My dad turned the keys of my mother's house over to me. He had been saving up for a new house when I came of age and he would buy a new one for him and his family. But that turned out to be just him and Joey in the end. Once Joey graduates high school he says he's going to sell it and buy a boat to live on. I think he's serious about that. Only time will tell. As for me, I decided to put my house up for sale and I currently live in an apartment near my job. I started working at a big production firm right after graduation, so I wanted to be close and I just don't have the time to look for anywhere else suitable to live yet. For now, this works for me. Right now, I've started dating one of my colleagues from work. He's kind and gentle. He reminds me a lot of my dad. Who knows, one day when I get married I'll look for another house then. But for now, I'm just enjoying my life. Thanks for listening to my story. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to our channel to hear more stories and help our channel grow. Bye.